Hey everyone, welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast where culture meets crypto. Today we have artist SamJ. Their art and designs draw heavily from their bold queer identity, transcending mediums, from new tech to videos to fashion. With feeling like Orchid and tides of identity, they have caught the eye of many collectors in Web3 and have been noted as one of NFT Now's next up ones to watch in 2022. Now they're here to discuss their upcoming drop at Username. Please welcome Sam J. Hey Sam, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate it. I guess I want to start off with like kind of like how I discovered you and how you came up on my feed. I forget the exact tweet because I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it like the other day. But you said something like really funny and snarky, and I was like, oh, and then, like, I think I clicked on your profile and I saw like you had also written a bunch of other funny things, and I was like, you know what, like I want to follow this person, and it was literally as simple as that. And it's just funny how that works, right? Like you said something funny, I started following you, and then I started seeing your work. I'm like, oh wow, like this is really cool. And then I think you might have messaged me like right after I followed you, and like we were talking a little bit about fashion. I think a little bit because I feel like we started talking about that, and then your art and stuff, and that's really like how it evolved. And I love the stuff that you've been doing and the stuff you've been doing in the space.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, it's funny to hear that. It is all like a little bit full circle because I think I maybe like bumped into you during Miami Art Week at the NFT Now event. I don't know. But then yeah, when you followed me or I followed you around that period, even though like I knew who you were just through the prevalence of yeah, I don't know, the NFT space. And then I also saw that you were at the Prada show during Milan Fashion Week. So when you followed me back, I was just like, oh, I kind of want to hear how that was. Like, that's really was a, I think, important moment in just like NFT culture to really be validated in like a mainstream highbrow manner. So yeah, we just talked about that for a little bit, and I shared a bit of my appreciation for fashion and how it inspires me, and then yeah, we just had a ongoing discussion. So I think it was like just lucky timing, but yeah, my Twitter is not super serious. I kind of just like shit post and
what's the point of having Twitter if you're not going to shit post every once in a while, right? So I really appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, let's start a little bit with like your background. I think one of the questions I think that everyone's always interested in when I have an artist on is, let's start with how you came to be an artist, right? Like was this the path that you had always intended? Like how, where you was, how did that your genesis story of you becoming a creator start?
yeah, well, I was always really interested in uh I don't know, school. Like I was pretty good at school. I was a couple of years ahead in math when I was like in middle school, and I wanted to leverage that as like a skill, but not just be some like person with good grades, like because I didn't really care about grades. So I was thinking like, okay, well maybe architecture, like I know that you use a lot of math, but it's still really creative. But going into high school when you're like 13, 14, you can't just like study architecture. So I got into like graphic design and computer graphics, and I just did that like pretty casually throughout high school. Like I was lucky that my high school had a opportunity to take computer graphics classes, and I knew that's what I wanted to continue. And so then I went and got a degree in graphic design with a minor in art history and studio art. But by the time I had finished my degree, I'd already been doing it for like 8 years, which is quite a long time, especially because I was only 21. I didn't want to start at like a junior level position at some like normal agency because I don't know, I already felt more or less like um, I had the skills I needed to I could do a lot more. So I just um, going along with that, I had gotten into crypto the year I started art school, and I told myself like I'm just gonna hold on to this until I graduate and sell it when I graduate, and that's how I'm gonna afford to like really start my own career and practice and not have to, start at the ground level in the professional field again. Because I was so tired of being like a student and having to like work with professors and be like on that sort of low bottom of the food chain type
Right.
situation because I knew I had my own potential, but when you're a student people don't often recognize your potential. You kind of have to prove yourself. So I was like, all
Mhm.
right, well, I was lucky enough to be exposed to crypto when I was like 18 in 2016, And I knew that I could leverage that just a little bit. So I was freelancing when I graduated, and I graduated in 2019, in December of 2019. But then COVID hit. So then very quickly, after a couple months, my money just ran out because nobody was hiring any freelancers.
Wait,
And
I wanna pause right here. I want to come back to this part, but I want to pause because you said something like really at the beginning that I thought was really interesting, was how you were a good student and but you wanted to like think about stuff creatively. And so like I just wanna like talk about that for a little bit because I was also a good student growing up, but I was like very not creative, right? Like I was good at math, like I was good at like I always got good grades, but I was always very much, and part of it was like I think my parents, right? Like I had immigrant parents that were always like, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a doctor, right? Like this is, these are like, when they were growing up, those were like the people that were very successful in their communities. So I think it's really interesting that you were doing well in school and you were like, well, I want to have a creative outlet for it. Was that something that, you fostered individually growing up? Was that something that your parents were fostering? Because like, I think that's very unique and you don't necessarily see that a lot. So I'm super curious as to how that came about.
yeah, it's actually really interesting because I know like I was definitely privileged to be able to just like dive into the arts and kind of like go for it. Um, but my dad was in the military, and my mom studied interior design, but I don't think she worked as an interior designer for very long. And then ended up just doing like temp work, but then became a stay-at-home mom. So my parents were definitely like supportive of my passions, but it definitely took some convincing, or I don't know, like I told them like, yeah, I'd go to school, I'm going to study graphic design, and then I'm going to add a double major for computer science. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to add a minor for computer science. And then it was like, oops, I minored in studio art instead. Like,
Yeah.
but at that point, like I had already been, doing art and graphic design and all of that for like 5, 6 years. And they really saw my commitment, and they knew, I think they trusted me, which was
Mhm.
really important. So I wouldn't necessarily say that like my parents were super fond of the idea, but I think that they definitely trusted me to like figure it out and make it happen. And I didn't really give them any other option because like I just knew what I wanted to do.
Right.
But yeah, I still think that's really a privilege to like I was only had to worry about myself. Like I didn't have to, immediately find work and support any siblings or anything. And I was able to just kind of like fuck off and be creative on my own, which is
Right.
definitely a really like something I'm really grateful for. And I'm glad that
Right.
my parents didn't hold me back in any way.
Yeah, and I want to give like big kudos to you, right, for being able to be that young. Like I literally like it's funny because like when I think about like creativity, I wouldn't think about like necessarily coding or like learning how to code to be creative, but it really is, right? Like the more
Absolutely.
I've interacted with like very technical people, and like we see it right with generative art, where you have programmers that are creating these beautiful looking things, and it's like with code, and it's something I've really grown to appreciate, and like wish that when I was younger, I had like, realized that myself. Right. So, I give you like lots of props for that, for realizing that on your own from a really young age,
Yeah,
so,
code is really interesting. I always put it off because yeah, like I said, my parents were always trying to push me into like tech and computer science and all of that. I was like, oh, like fuck code, like that seems so silly. But then in my last semester of university, I had to take a web design class, and actually the fact that like I coded my own website and I have complete agency over like working on what is shown on my website, what it says, how it's arranged, it's really actually nice. And I really I think a lot of Web3 is going to find that creativity through coding again, because I read something a couple years ago is that like the subscription model and the sort of like AdSense click revenue model of monetizing content through the like Web2 space really destroyed a lot of the creativity that was online. And like people would just code websites for fun or try to be the most creative with their, personal blog. But then you had to make something that was really easy to be monetizable, and those things weren't through the methods that, became popular in Web 2. So I really hope that Web 3 helps bring people back to that kind of playfulness that people had in like the early 90s and early 2000s of the internet.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because this is probably out before you were born, but it was called GeoCities, where
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, like where you would like kind of create your own website. And like this is when I was like, I don't know, 13, 14, when I was first getting the internet, and I would mess around with it. And to your point is like, like I would mess around with like the background color and the fonts and like, all these cool little things with like messing around with HTML, which I would do at the time. But again, I didn't realize it was like creative, right? Like I was just like, oh, like I
yeah.
want to put my content online. And like that, like, yeah, it's that was definitely lost, right? To your point is like, because people would be like, why reinvent the wheel if like this, this format gets you like this version, this much conversion rate, which leads to more sales, right? And a lot of that, like we see that now where there's a lot of uniformity across the web, where there's like, you go to a website and you kind of know, oh, this is the kind of company this is because I've seen that format before, right?
Right. And I think there is value in a sort of understood language across different platforms. But like I remember on Tumblr, you could go into the CSS and the HTML and like completely rearrange your own blog still, um, even though they would give you like templates to use. And like kind of like what you're saying with GeoCities, it's like I remember a lot of people did some crazy shit on their blog, and I imagine that had that platform showing that you can be creative on their like with code. And I think just the nature of Tumblr being a bit more artsy, like where if yeah, Facebook lets you edit the CSS, it'd be like whatever, like it's Facebook. But
Right.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, no. Thank you for taking that segue. I wanted to touch on that, like that creativity coming out at a young age, because I thought that was super interesting. But yeah, let's go back to beginning of the pandemic. You're
Yeah.
starting your career, and what ends up happening.
So I was freelancing. I didn't get a job because like I said, I knew like, all right, I don't want to just like wait around and, work a couple of years and build up a resume again. Like to me, that just basically felt like going back to school. That's the last thing I wanted to be doing. But then, yeah, with the pandemic, pretty much every design studio was really just focused on financing the staff they already had. And they were really not open to bringing in new freelancers. And so I started looking into other ways to just make money in different creative industries. So I was going to like model castings, and I was working on physical paintings to put in galleries and apply to like residencies, looking to grants and stuff. Just really work like seeing what else I could do in different avenues that were a bit more removed from what I was expecting to do based off of my background in like education. And then through that, I had also seen some of my friends on Twitter selling their work for or on Superrare and like as NFTs, and Rarible was really popping at the time, like mid 2020. And I was like, well, I might as well. Like I have some pieces I've just been working on, so let me put them up as NFTs. Like I don't have any crypto right now, but like I understand the technology. I got involved like 5 years ago, so I was really lucky. I didn't take much for me to understand it or learn it. Like I just kind of did a quick Google search, and I was like, okay, cool. Like set up a
So
MetaMask and put out.
I thought that was an interesting story. The first time we spoke and you were telling me how you got into crypto, I thought that was pretty interesting. Could you go over like how'd you get into crypto? Because like you got in at like, I think you just said you were like 17, 18 or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. One of my dad's old friends had gotten pretty heavily involved, like put in some big investments, and so we were like back in our hometown where I was born, and visiting old friends and stuff, and during the holidays. So this was like Christmas break, my freshman year of college, and my dad calls me into the other rooms, like, "Yeah, you know Bitcoin, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, but like it's weird. Like I don't really know it." And then all of a sudden, this dude who like I don't really know, but is my dad's close friend, just fully shows me his wallet with like $1 million in it. It's like he opened like a briefcase in a movie or something, and it was just like glowing. I was like, this is crazy. Like I'm six, like 17, 18, and this dude is just like blatantly showing me $1 million like in my face. That's crazy. And so he was explaining like why it was a good investment, what made it more valuable than just like normal stocks, why it was valid as like an actual currency, and having somebody like I guess onboard me, especially somebody who is like a close friend of my dad in that way, like it it wasn't just some random guy at a party. It was somebody who I felt I could trust. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay, this guy probably knows what he's talking about. Like, this is pretty cool. So I just set up a Coinbase account, put in like a couple bucks here and there. Like I think I put in a couple $100 total over the course of like the rest of my first year at university, and just kind of held it. And it
No,
was
I mean,
really,
great.
really crazy. I remember being, I don't mean to cut you off, but like,
Yeah.
I remember telling my friend about it, and I was just like spitting out numbers. I wasn't even talking about like Bitcoin, but I was trying to get my friend to involved in it. And I was like, remember saying like, yeah, it was 800, now it's 1200, and like just like talking very like broad numbers. And somebody just based off of the numbers I was saying was like, is that Bitcoin? Are you talking about Bitcoin? And I was like, whoa, yeah, that's weird. And then by
Mhm.
the end of the next year, so about like right before Christmas break, the year later, is when it
Mhm.
hit like 20,000 in 2017. And
Mhm.
I could not go to the library to study for my finals without the entire, like every group in every corner, it was all talking about it. And like I remember talking to my boss at the newspaper about it, and like it was just so crazy. And like that was really a moment when I was like, I'm so glad I got involved when I did, and like this is definitely something I'm gonna hold on to.
Mhm. No, that's awesome. That's a great story. And yeah, I love the fact that you were able to get so involved from like a young age, right? Because like you see the value in it, and like you and like I always have this conversation with people where it's like, especially when it comes to NFTs. I'm pushing 40, and when I talk to like people that are my age or older, the concept of like digital ownership, they don't understand it. But when I talk to somebody that's like under the age of 20, they're like, oh yeah, like that makes total sense. Like I fuck with that, right? And like it's just
Yeah.
and I think it's really important to kind of like understand those concepts from a young age, because now like because of that, like you are fully immersed in the space now, and you're like very young, right? So like to me, like, and that you have your whole life ahead of you, and you're really interactive in the space, and you're really working in the space, and that to me like just it makes me feel really good, and super bullish on like the tech in general.
Oh, absolutely. But it also kind of makes me think like if you're like 60 or 70, the world has changed so much since they were my age. And
Mhm.
so I kind of have a lot of respect for people who are that age also, interested in getting involved, and like damn, like you saw cell phones invented and now you're getting involved in NFTs. Like that's such a jump, and to be like fully on board with all that stuff, like I think that's also like just as crazy. But
That's to build on that, right? Like I think one of the things that I'm really good at is being open-minded and thinking, knowing that I can learn from anybody, right? So it's like even though
yeah,
I could be older than you, that doesn't necessarily mean I know everything in the world and I know more than you, right? There's going to be things that I'm really good at, but I also understand things that I'm not really good at. And one of the things to your point is like that I respect about people who are like 60 plus years old that get into crypto and understand crypto is their willingness to learn. And like I know for me personally, and I know everybody always says this, like you always want to be a student, right? Like no matter how old
yes,
you are, there's always something to learn. And to me, like I sometimes I think about it, I'm like, wow, like when the next you know crypto boom or whatever the new technology is, like 20, 30, 40 years from now, I hope that I'm still open-minded enough that I'm willing to learn and try to understand why something is important, right? And I think that that's like something that like as you grow older, you always want to have that curiosity.
yeah. It's really funny because we were talking about how I got involved like with my creativity when I was really young, and I remember around that same time, like I told myself like very specifically, because I also was like super involved with video games, and I was like, I want to be like, I never want to grow old and be out of the loop with like the next video game or the newest technology or whatever. And like, it was within the realm of video game technology because that's what I knew at that time. But it's very interesting to see how that like mindset has brought me to NFTs, and just the willingness and acceptance to be like, what is this? I don't know, let's figure it out. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think that it's really the curiosity is what's going to help a lot of people find the motivation to get involved. um, but I also think that because I've found crypto sort of before mainstream adoption, it really solidified like the like ethos behind it of like decentralization and like a globalized finance, and really like what it could mean and what we should be building towards. Because although I didn't really get too involved into crypto, I just kind of like bought early and held. um, Understanding that principle coming into NFTs, I feel like is definitely something a lot of people miss out on if they're getting involved in NFTs in 2021 or 2022. They just see sort of like Web3 as the next thing to jump onto. Like they want to be the next Facebook or the next Twitter or whatever. But they are missing out on like, oh, we need to, or we have the opportunity to build completely new things that have never been done before that can like change the way that we even conceptualize our identities. Like if you look at how we represent ourselves today versus 10 years ago before Twitter and Instagram, everything is different. Like genuinely everything is different. And it was the people 10 years ago building these social media apps that recognize like, oh, we can change the world. And that seems like really like a cliche thing to say, but it's true. Like it's really true. And it's that to me is like the most important thing to know right away when you're getting involved with NFTs is like it's completely a brand new opportunity to do like to sort of remove everything that's been done before and like build from the ground up again. And I think because I understood that right away, it really helped me with my creative journey because I felt no pressure to create what was already popular in the space or do what I was already good at. I was just like, fuck it, we ball. Like this is like no one can tell me what to do. That's the point of this. I can do anything and everything and let me try it all. And that's really
Right.
been my approach to just even my own artwork. But it goes so much more beyond that. And like I have such a appreciation for people who are, you know, putting in the work to build entire new projects that I can't even begin to like imagine.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah, it's just like the opportunities and everything that, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's really interesting because I think in the beginning part of the conversation, where talking about like our parents and their influence on us, right? And like, our parents obviously want the best for us, right? Like that's why they will like. I know that's why my parents were like trying to push me towards certain careers because they're like, yeah, well, we want the best for you long term, and this and that. It's like I'm really interested to see long term how the proliferation of NFTs and now making it more realistic to have a career as an artist and be successful and do well is going to change how parents kind of like raise their kids, right? Because like in general, right, like for I don't, as a generalization, most of our parents will push us away from creativity as a career, like from a young age, right? They're going to be like, well, we want to make sure you make money so you don't starve, right? So it's like it's good to have the creative part in your life as a hobby, but like I'm very interested to see over the next 10 to 20 years how that starts to change, being like, oh wow, like you can be an artist and you can be very successful. And because of that, like, how much does that open up the space and like humanity in general for like more creativity?
I think that like I've had a few discussions with some of my friends about like how the role of the artist in our contemporary society has changed. Like I'm a huge art history nerd and fashion history nerd, and like in my opinion, like the role of like a working class successful artist that anywhere from just like making a livable wage to being like a pop star like Keith Haring or something, that role has really kind of disappeared from like through the 80s and 90s, and you really only get like the one or two standout people like Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst. And so um, a lot of like our parents' generation and my generation kind of grew up without this idea of like nobody grows up and is like, oh, I'm going to be a painter. Like I can make a living off of making paintings.
Mhm.
But I think with social media, we saw a lot of new small businesses and like Etsy shops and Depop's and sort of the commodification of art and the within the understanding that we have of like a small business. So basically, you could have like a little shop front, but it would be then just on social media, and so you would have a more success reaching like a global audience. And now I think going into Web3, it's really taken that and pushed it even further to be like, you know, what I don't know, what is your shop front? Like it can be anything. Like it doesn't have to just be little, coasters or handmade sweaters or like a sticker pack. And that's not to shame anybody who does do that. I think that's, not everybody has the opportunity or even the ambition to go beyond that. But I think just having the agency and the platform to do so is really, really important and helps society as a whole recontextualize what we think an artist can be as a business. But in the grand scheme of things, I think why people feel inclined to like shy away from the arts industry is the lack of like guarantee. Because something about like going to school, getting a degree, then going and getting your master's and getting your PhD, you're gonna get a job and it will pay you, like, period, hands down, pretty much. Like, that's a lot of steps, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but like the security behind it is why a lot of people feel comfortable doing that. I feel like a lot of people are not used to looking beyond what they're comfortable with. So they don't even think like what is possible uh, further than what is just kind of like handed to them.
Right.
And I remember being like really shocked about like when I went to art school. I was like, wait a minute, like it was really weird to me. I felt like I was the only one who was really looking to do more than just get a good grade.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of our society is just built off of what is comfortable.
Right.
So, but it's really important to have the opportunity for artists to explore themselves and like really do more with their business, and especially adding value to digital artwork. Like none of my art would be valuable if it weren't for NFTs. Like there'd be no place for it in the traditional art world.
Right. So yeah, let's start delving into that then. You were saying that when you found NFTs, it was kind of through your friends who were posting stuff on Superrare. What was your initial thought on NFTs? And then also, what got you to mint the first NFT, your first NFT?
I don't really remember. Like it was so long ago at this point, and I had my first NFT was actually just some random project I did that was like a little like 3D motion graphics animation that I just did to post on my Instagram to like have an active feed and not post anything.
Mhm.
But it was something like I had listened to a new album and I really liked the music. It was like a new genre of music. So I just made something that was inspired by that album, but I hadn't posted it yet. And then I was thinking like I had applied to Superrare in like June or July, and I got denied because I didn't really understand exactly what NFTs were at the time. I just saw like Superrare the website.
Mhm.
So then when September came around, which is when I minted my first piece, I really like saw more people posting on Rarible. I like Googled what NFTs were and like just had an understanding of like what it actually was and how it was like built into Ethereum and all of that. And so I was sitting on this project that I was planning on releasing that hadn't come out yet. And I was like, well, I have this, so why not? Like, let's put it out now. I applied to Superrare, but I knew it was going to take like a month or two to hear back. And like I said, I didn't have money, so I didn't have time to wait. And I just put it on Rarible. And I was like super active in their Discord and on Twitter. And I remember like anytime I would see a new Twitter account with like a Superrare link or a Rarible link in their bio, I'd be like, oh, cool, like a new artist. Let me follow them, and just made some friends. And then that first piece sold for like zero point 0.5 ETH, which was like $150 at the time. And it sold in like 2 or 3 days. And that was really the first time, like since I had been working post grad, that I felt like, okay, this is like the first pull in a certain direction. Like this is a good sign. Like this was cool. This is exciting. I like the vibes here. So I just continued. I was putting out a lot of the work I had done just on my own as like passion projects, and
Mhm.
also I was like using the time buffer of putting out old projects to then help work on new things and discover new ways of creating that were a bit more native to like where I wanted to be in the NFT space. And so after about like 2 or 3 weeks, I like obviously ran out of old work to post, or old work that I felt comfortable selling.
Mhm.
And then so my work started slowing down more, and I started putting more effort in and like setting up my studio a bit more. Um, and then it was really interesting to see how the work I was doing within the context of like trying to get freelance jobs slowly migrated into work that was like far more authentic to myself and my own creativity, due to my like experience with NFTs and like finding myself through finding out where I wanted to sit in the NFT space. And then it was about Halloween, like right before Halloween, and I was still kind of like figuring out that where I wanted to go with NFTs, because I really knew like it was going to be like I was already doing it full time at this point, because I had nothing else to do, so I was doing NFTs full time. And something I hadn't done yet was drag, and drag is something I had been doing just as like a side hobby passion, pretty much in parallel to my journey with crypto. So like I remember buying my first pieces of makeup like a week or two after buying my first Bitcoin, which is like really wild to think about now, full circle. But like um, throughout the like 5 years of doing drag, I was always trying to figure out how I could work it into my creativity in some way, whether that's like working in the fashion industry or working in the beauty industry as like a graphic designer or an animator of some sort or something like that. So then finally I was like, well, it's Halloween. That's kind of like silly. I'll do like a sort of spooky drag makeup look just for fun. Like, why not? Again, like I said, no one can tell me what to do. That's kind of the point of NFTs. Like anyone can do anything. And it went really well. And like I did an edition of 20 pieces and they sold out in like 2-3 minutes. And I was like, whoa, holy shit. Like I was really like blown away, because I don't know, like it was the first drag NFT, I'm pretty sure, like ever. I don't think I was like, no one was really thinking about it in that term. But looking back, like I don't really know what else would have been before if it wasn't for that. Um, I don't like to claim first. I don't think it really matters, but it was really exciting to see that like that was really like solidified that thought process I had of like, really, I can do anything I want. I can create any type of work. No one is going to stop me or say like, I don't think this will fit in. And I I just kept going with it. And then after a couple months of that, just posting on like OpenSea and Rarible, I was able to get in touch with the team at Superrare and send in an application, and I minted my Genesis on Superrare in November of 2020.
Nice.
So yeah.
That's amazing. You know,
Yeah.
and so like I think that's a great time to start talking about like your new piece, your new piece. Obviously you've minted several pieces on Super Rare. I've noticed that the through line and the theme for all the pieces seems to be our relationship between identity and the digital world. How is that affected in your new piece at username?
Yeah, so my new piece is called At Username. I think this is going to be the debut of me talking about it publicly. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be definitely a commentary on like many aspects of how we express ourselves, both digitally and and physically, and like the different paths that we can take through our digital identity, and which way can like how can we most authentically um, free ourselves from the boundaries of society, kind of like what I was saying before, where people are usually really comforted and comfortable within these sort of roles that we put ourselves in. But now that you have the option to be anonymous, or in my case the option to do whatever you want with no supervision, no parental supervision, um, which way is the most freeing, and is one way better than the other, and like what impact does each journey and each path have on the individual's identity? Because even just between the two of us, like have a face filter on right now versus me. Like I feel in my profile picture is me in a full face of makeup and like almost a caricature of my identity. So it's like fully complete polar opposites. And along with this piece, it will be a digital sculpture accompanied by a sort of twin physical sculpture. And um,
Can you
the
can you explain why you chose to do a physical with the digital? Like what's the relationship between them?
Yeah, so this is doing a physical with this piece specifically was like really important to me, because although it is a sort of commentary on digital identity, I think it's really interesting to also interpret how like we are all human beings and we don't only exist online. And so I feel like the way that we choose to represent ourselves online is also a reflection of who we are in the real world. And a lot of people in Web3, I think, forget that. And there's this common misconception that if everybody were anonymous, there would be like no prejudice, no sexism, no homophobia, no racism or whatever. But then at the same time, in my experience, have encountered that if you're anonymous, everyone still assumes you're a man. So that's not really true. And so that's, for me personally, a big reason why am not anonymous, because I want to be visible and show who I am. And I find sort of comfort and freedom through my expression physically. And I think that's a really important element of my artwork that you can very clearly see. And it transcends both the physical and the digital world. And the way that the two are related, I think, is really interesting also for those who choose to be anonymous, because I don't know, like I really struggle to understand, or not really struggle to understand, but like I'm not anonymous, never been anonymous, and never wanted to be. So I really don't have the same breadth of understanding for those who choose to be anonymous. I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's just like I obviously live my life, and I can't also live somebody else's life to understand that. But to me, having the physical, there's a certain point where like I have to hand make the physical, and so there's always that element of flaws and imperfectness, and it truly is like at a specific level like a completely different project and a different piece than the digital version. And I think that also goes to parallel the narratives between anonymity and like being not anonymous online, and
Right.
those parallels. So there were a few moments where I was like, oh man, making this physical is like really fucking hard. Like, what if I just didn't do it? Like nobody would notice. But it was really something I felt like fully sent my sort of message home. And definitely I'm really excited to be wrapping up this project.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting. I think you touched upon like some really interesting topics right there with the anonymity, and like I'm going to talk about from being an anonymous person in the space, or pseudo anon in the space, where my the reason why I did it was because I remember it was like around this time last year when the Beeple sale happened. I like at the time, not many people. I come from the finance world, and nobody
Yeah.
in the finance in like the stock market equities world knew what an NFT was. And so I remember being put in touch with a couple producers at major media outlets, both in print and on television. And they're like, well, we want you to come on TV to talk about NFTs, but you have to come on like, showing your face and showing your real name. And I was like, well, like, at the time, like all my credibility was behind gmoney, the crypto punk ape. And I was like, well, nobody cares what I have to say, like with my face and my name. People care what gmoney, the crypto punk ape, has to say. And so to me, I was very much kind of like, I started thinking about it. I'm like, wow, like we put so much value on like credentials and being able to see like, a person's face. And, I'm a minority, and working on Wall Street, like, it's mostly dominated by, white men. And so like I saw that firsthand. And one of my, actually, it's funny because one of the first time I started meeting people in crypto at like, conferences and stuff, I was most surprised of how not everybody was a tall white male, right? Because like I was just used to being surrounded by that, right? Like working on Wall Street. And so like to me, that's kind of why I was like, all right, I'm going to push this anonymity part, because at the end of the day, like what my name is and what I look like doesn't necessarily really matter, right? It's like, the name that we're given at birth is generally, something that maybe is special in our family, but not special to us ourselves. And what we look like, we don't, it's determined by our genes for the most part, right? We can work out and eat healthy and stuff like that, but like really ultimately like our gene expression is really determining what we look like. So I was like, wow, like, what my user, and we all had like, getting online from a really young age, like I'm sure your usernames, just like mine, have evolved over time with like, like I remember my first username was linked to like my favorite wrestler at the time, right? Like, and like, and just how that's evolved over time. And like it's a very personal experience, right? Like you choose to be doxxed because it's a very personal experience to you. And like I just wanted to try to push that narrative forward of like, who I am and what I look like doesn't matter as long as I'm contributing to the space in an authentic manner, right? And like you could either fuck with that or you don't, right? And that to me was really like my thought process behind it. And I think it's been really interesting to see how that has evolved over, just this past year, in the space, right? Like, I'm super curious as to what you see. How do you see identity and anonymity evolving with the tech and Web3 over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be interesting because part of the artist statement that I wrote for this piece was that being anonymous leaves you really vulnerable in the way that like only your direct actions, or like the sum of your direct actions, are what people then know you for as your reputation, which I think is like generally what you can say for all people. But I think that with the lack of identity, it's like um, I don't know how, there's like a vacuum almost. So then, like, let's say, for example, like cancel culture. If you try to cancel somebody who's anonymous, again, like if their identity is based off of their actions, then one wrong action can also equally speak for as many as their valorant actions. But as somebody who, like, similar to what you were saying, like it doesn't matter what you look like, it matters what you're doing. I also feel the same way. Like I can present non-binary, I can be a drag queen, I can do whatever I want in the space. That's like, for the most people, like their first time ever even like speaking to somebody like me. And yeah, it doesn't matter who I am or what I look like, but what I'm doing. Um, and but I feel like there's a bit more leeway because people understand like the human element of my identity and like the breadth and the multifaceted existence that I have as like a real human. And I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say dangerous, but like to me at least, I would be scared to erase my human existence and be anonymous. But I think, I don't know, I feel like it also is really different because I have the opportunity to build myself up as an artist. Like I was really starting from zero
Mhm.
and sort of already had a strong idea of who I wanted to be within my identity. And so to me, I know so many other people who would feel more scared to be doxxed in the way that I am, and fear that they might do the wrong thing or be, one of their many flaws or, facets of their existence might be the wrong one.
Right.
Whereas like I'm the other way around, where I'm like, if I were anonymous, then like I feel like it would, so I think it's really important to have um, just an idea of who you can be beyond what is already present in society. And I think both presenting as a doxed person or an anonymous person can do that for an individual. But it's really interesting to see the result of both, especially in the space.
Right. I totally agree with you. I think that just like in crypto, right? Just having that optionality to be doxed or undoxed, and you choose which one you have. But the important thing is we have that choice as users, right? And like something that I've thought a lot about lately was like, when you think about, and like this is kind of cancel culture specifically, which is I think been really prevalent in the space for like the last 2 months, is when you think about, and like the questioning of and this has me questioning about like the permanence of blockchain, right? Is like, when we're all young, I'm sure like everybody has done something that they're ashamed of, right? Like that's part of like the learning
Yeah.
process where, you learn, when you make a mistake, all you can ask for yourself as an individual is when you realize you made a mistake, you learn from it, you change, and you become a better person, right? And I think that is just like what growth is. And one of the things I've been thinking about with regards to I guess like how humans have interacted for the last 10,000 years, right? Is like if you made a mistake like 10,000 years ago in your tribe, and let's say like the mistake was so bad that you got like kicked out of your tribe and you had to go find like another group of people to live with that necessarily don't know who you are or what your background is, you can kind of like start over, right? And hopefully you will have learned from the mistake that you made and won't make that mistake going forward. And like you can start off new. And like to me, like one of the things that I've been seeing is like obviously people have been like canceled for like things they did like 10, 15 years ago. And it's like, me like the empathetic side of me is like, well, part of the human experience is being able to learn and change over time, because the person I was when I was 10 or 15 or 20 is not the person that I am today. And like it's just been super interesting. I don't have an answer for it. I'm just bringing it up because like I just think it's like as humans for thousands of years, you've been able to kind of wipe the slate clean. And now with like the advent of technology and blockchain, it's like, do I necessarily want everything that I've done, every action that I've done forever since I was a child on chain, because that lives forever? And then like people are like, oh, well, that's what this person was like X years ago. And it's like, yeah, maybe it was a mistake and I apologize, but like, that's not who I am now. And I think that like, I don't have an answer, but like, to me, that's like things that I've been like thinking about over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what I was touching on with anonymity with let's say in a tribal setting, yeah, you make a mistake that's, really bad, but at the same time you've been in this community and people know you beyond just that single action. Whereas when you're anonymous, it's really easy to single out a single action from that individual because there's so little behind it. And conversely though, it's also really easy to, look at a single action from a doxed person and, and maybe even in that situation, they have more, whatever. Yeah. Cancel culture is just weird, but I think like, honestly, I don't really get too involved with it. Like, and I try like, yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. And I think, it's also interesting to see how in a decentralized space, people deal with it. For example, like that guy from ENS, like I don't even know, I had no idea who he was, saw a bunch of drama about it on the timeline, but then people just like had a governance vote or whatever to kick him out. And then, yeah, he's out. So it's like, okay, whatever. Like I just kind of minded my business. It didn't really bother me. And I think that's a good example of like what Web3 can do for people. I mean, because
I agree with you, right? Like I don't necessarily have an opinion on that whole situation, but I think the interesting thing about Web3 that doesn't exist in Web2 is that the community can vote, right? So it's like if that happened at like Twitter, then like Twitter management decides what happens, right?
Exactly.
But this was at least put to a governance vote, and they're like, well, he doesn't align with our values. It could be the right decision, it could be the wrong decision. We'll see over time, right? Like I've seen pros and cons to keeping him and not keeping him, and I'm very indifferent because I feel like I'm still learning. Not that I'm indifferent, I'm just kind of watching because I also it's very weird. I don't know. I think we're all learning this together.
I think it sets a good precedent, not because of any specific like aligned values, but just that we can as a community like do something like that where like I don't know if it was civil, I haven't really been using Twitter, but like in a fairly civil manner, like there's a process to dealing with situations like this compared to just like, oh no, I'm getting canceled, let me just deactivate my Twitter for 2 weeks and then come back like nothing happened. All in all, I think it's great that we have a choice and Web3 is decentralized in that manner because yeah, otherwise if it's just up to some board members that don't understand any of the situations and the nuances, then it gets really messy, even messier.
Right. And I think that, and to me, that's one of the key tenets of Web3, right? Is like the community can decide, right? Like if there's going to be censorship or let's call a vote, it's not decided by like 5 or 10 people that don't have any accountability. It's decided by the community, right? So it's like if we, if let's say the community wants to stand for racism, then like, okay, like sure, like maybe the people that like vote for it will like vote for racism, but like the people that are not racist will leave that community and that community will ultimately grow smaller, right? So like it's I don't know. Listen, this is all like an experiment happening in real time, and I think it's very interesting to see how that evolves over time. And yeah, I want to change gears for a second, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about diversity and inclusivity. I'm constantly looking for opportunities to support new and diverse artists entering in the space. What do you see for like us as a community? Like, what are the best ways for us to support and be a more inclusive community?
It's really important for people like myself or women in the space or people of color in the space to be like visible and show that there is diversity, because if everyone was anonymous, then it could be extremely diverse, but no one would really know. And we're not like, and a lot of the outsiders from the space would just assume that it's not, because that's kind of the reputation of crypto. And so you had mentioned that like you have like, it's important that people have the choice to be anonymous, but at what point is it like not a choice, because if you're like a cisgender white male, you can be anonymous and you're like, okay, well, there's still plenty of representation. I know other cisgender white males will feel perfectly fine joining crypto. I don't have to lead by example. But for myself, like, I know I would feel really upset if it turned out that like Pac was a super queer artist and just remained anonymous and did not patron any of the other queer artists in the space and just looked out for themselves. I'd be like, wait, what the fuck? Like, that's so fucked up. Like, because a big part of the queer community in this space is supporting each other. Like, Victor Ferocious owns a piece of mine, and Giselle Flores owns a piece of mine, and I own a piece of Laurel Charleston's, and like I bought some of Yasmir's work, and Sarah Zucker has a piece of mine. I have a piece of hers. Like, coming into the space and being able to feel welcome enough to explore drag and set out this whole career for myself was major. And I try to be, just as much as an example now as, people like Sarah Zucker were for me a year and a half ago. So I think the best way to lead diversity forward would be to support the voices of the people who are being visible, because not everybody is in a position where they can be or feels comfortable enough to be, a spokesperson or, be, held on this pedestal. And so I think it's really important for people like you to have people like me on this podcast. I also saw like you had Latasha on your podcast as well. Like, I love Latasha so much, and she has done so much for the NFT space. She's always, talking about, first Black woman rapper in the NFT space. I think that's so important. And so just being, not everybody has to, all of a sudden be an activist, but just being able to amplify the voices of those who choose to be is really, really important. And also just buying their artwork and helping them get opportunities beyond the NFT space and beyond. Like, there's a lot of value beyond just like a transaction of buying art.
Right.
There's a lot more to it, and that's something that I've definitely grown to learn and appreciate. So I've had a lot of help myself with just collectors or curators reaching out to me looking for diversity and giving me the opportunity to show my work in their galleries or expositions or shows. And I always appreciate that. So definitely just, also doing your own research, like finding those communities, because
Right.
it's not hard. Like, we're here, and we don't need to be tweeting like, what's your favorite woman artist, tag below. Like, just literally go to Superrare and look up women, like scroll down the market page. Like, believe me, all of my stuff is tagged with like LGBT, it's tagged with queer. Like, you can just go to Superrare and Google it or search
Right.
it. You can go to these platforms, and a lot of like Superrare had a whole Pride article. Like, if you looked up Pride on their editorial website, it will pull up multiple articles with showcasing dozens of artists. So I think that's also really important as well, is to search out these communities on your own and make sure that you have a diverse feed of, and I'm just speaking in terms of artists because that's the community that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure there's plenty of DAOs. Like, I know Herstory DAO does a lot of great work for diversity as well, supporting like Black femmes. But yeah, just doing the research and finding these communities on your own and being aware of them, so then if you have the chance to amplify them and or give them opportunities, you know who to reach out to.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that, for the most part, every artist in the space has the link to their work in their bio, right? And so it's like, it doesn't take much work to, start going down the rabbit hole in any subject, whether it be like diverse artists or, just like any project or whatever that you want to get involved with. So I agree with you. It's like, you can do like 20, 30 minutes of research just to get started. And I think you'll have a ton of information that to digest over the next couple of days.
Absolutely.
For the creators and builders out there, what recommendations can you share on how to get started as with an NFT career, and what tips would you share that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
Oh, I have such a hard time giving people advice now because it's so radically different than when I started in 2020. I would say something a lot of people told me back then that I didn't quite understand until even like a couple months ago as an artist, it's important to like collect collectors. Kind of like what I was saying, where there's more value than just the finances, because there's a lot of money in NFTs, and that is kind of like the first thing that you will start securing in your projects, whether it's art or anything, like the finance. That's kind of the first step. But then beyond that is like the network, and where is your network, who's your audience, and where is their network. And so for me, that's always been important, to have a diverse group of collectors. And I think I've minted like 14 pieces on Superrare, and I have 12 individual collectors, which is really still a lot. Like, so the fact that I have, 12 of these people I can reach out to and have I have a strong connection with all of these people. And so adjacently, I have connections to all of their networks as well. So this goes into, if you're building a portfolio as an artist and a career as an artist, but also if you're building up like some sort of DAO or a token or any kind of like metaverse project, is really try to get involved with people that you find value in, and not just for the money, because money is kind of the easiest part, which sounds like really silly to say, but considering that NFTs is fundamentally built off of a financial technology, the finance side is in abundance. And then finding people who have a network that is actually relevant to the work that you are trying to build in whatever niche that you choose, that's going to be the most important part.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think some of the more successful artists I've seen in the space, now that I think about it, to your point, is like they collect collectors, right? They have a very good network of collectors, and they're always, making sure that they have that connection with their audience, right? And their collector base. And I think that is super key, right? And that's I think why Twitter is a much better place for NFTs than Instagram is, right? Because there's no
Yeah.
real conversation that's really had on Instagram the way it's had on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, you found a tweet of mine randomly, and you don't even remember how. And like, I don't like, how would you have found me through Instagram if it in a
Right.
similar manner? So I think that is like that definitely, I agree that like Twitter is great for that. But it's also, um, I think as an artist, something I always try to tell my friends and who are starting out as well is like, in my opinion, it's really much better to like start out your work priced lower than you think it should sell for, and build up from there. Because like at the start of 2021, I was minting pieces for only like 1 ETH, even though, yeah, oh man, my Genesis story is a mess. But like, long story short, my Genesis piece in November got bid up to like 4.5 ETH, but then it got withdrawn. And
Oh,
I
why?
like, because people, it was the first drag piece on Superrare. It was the first performance art piece on Superrare. It was like really, it had a huge impact at the time.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of people both at Superrare and also like mutual friends of mine who were artists on Superrare telling me like, don't sell it for less than 10 ETH, don't sell it for less than 10 ETH. And then it only got up to like 4.5, and I didn't accept it. And so after a month, they like withdrew it. So it's kind of my fault.
Right.
But and that's definitely like, I'm glad that happened with my Genesis, because I was able to figure out that mentality of like collecting collectors and maintaining momentum as an artist right away, like really early. But
Mhm.
after following that, I didn't sell anything until February. So going into and I was still minting pieces, because I don't I don't like to only have one piece available at a time. I think that's really silly. Just like make art, take your time, don't rush things, and put things out when they need to come out.
Mhm.
But I put out, I think, like 4 pieces. So my Genesis, and then a piece in December, and then 2 pieces in January. And then finally somebody bid on my Genesis again in February. Um, and it ended up selling for like 2.5 ETH. But in the meantime, to regain momentum, I started repricing all of my new work in 2021 at 1 ETH, because to me, it's like, obviously I know there is demand for my work, but I just need to regain momentum, and that will help me grow from here. And like, again, give me the opportunity to develop a network of these collectors. And to this day, the 2 pieces that I have that sold for 1 ETH only are they sold to collectors that I'm still like very much in touch with, and I work very closely with today. So I think, again, when you're getting started, it's really easy to see these high sales and try to price your work like 5, 10, 20 ETH. But in reality, the best part of this community is like developing your inner circle of these people who really truly believe in you and want to build you up as you build yourself up. And in a way, like, it's hard to do that if you're pricing them out. Especially, I mean, I was coming into the space with like no prior background. So a lot of artists might be coming in here with a lot of industry experience or, you know, a high reputation. Like, I knew Fuck Render because he worked with like Lil Nas X prior to NFTs. So whole different what is that expression?
Ball game.
Ball
All
game,
different
yes.
ball game, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I was like, anyways, yeah, that's how I'm so gay. I don't even know the sports expression, but like it's a completely different range of artists network coming from that industry. So that's another advice I would give to artists. If you're like really, really starting out, like I was, don't even bother comparing yourself to a lot of the successful artists in the space, because it's so, a lot of them have been working for decades as artists and have put in a lot of hard work before the NFT space. And, you know, it might be crazy to be like, oh, they've only been in the space for a year and I've been in the space for a year and they're doing way better. But it's like, yeah, look at all their shit beforehand too. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Their body like that. I mean, that was people, right? People
Right.
like, you know, the culmination, that was the culmination of 15 years of work, not, you know, like I was in the space for 2 months and I sold it. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
I agree with you.
I remember when people joined, like this piece and that piece, there are both Beeple prints. Cause when I was designing in high school, like Beeple was still doing his everydays. Like I did a month of everydays when I was in high school because of Beeple. So,
Oh, wow.
and like
Awesome.
both of those prints back there are from like 2015. So I remember him from, you know, almost a decade ago, and it was a huge deal when he joined NFTs. So yeah, don't ever try to compare yourself to some of these, you know, industry hitters like that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important, because I think people will be like, oh, well, I first minted my first NFT, and a lot of time artists come in and they're like, well, this is what the fair market value is that I sell it for. It's like I tell people this across the board in crypto is underprice and over deliver, and
Absolutely.
you know, like, because you know your collectors or your group, your posse, your clan will be your best like marketing that you could possibly do, right? Because they'll be like, oh, you know, like Sam has been doing this and that, and like you really want to get involved, and that does way more than, you know, you tweeting about whatever you're working on, right? Because like that word of mouth is really where the magic sauce is, kind of.
Yeah, and I saw this thing a while back talking about like the adoption rate of like investments or something. And it's like you have to hear somebody recommend you a product or an investment or like a new coin or whatever, or like 3 times until you really can convince yourself to do it. Because like the first time somebody tells you and you're like, okay, sure, let me look into that, whatever. Second time you're like, oh yeah, I heard about that. Like this person told me. And then the third time somebody tells you like, oh, you should buy like a doodle or whatever, right? Like you hear about doodles 3 times, you're like, damn, I know so many people talking about this, let me get involved.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if you have 3 separate collectors and they all are friends with a fourth collector, then you already have your 3 sort of points of interest right away. So it doesn't matter if, you know, the 3 people bought your work for 1 ETH, then the fourth person buys it for 5. If you look at the average, then they might all then match up to what you expected them to sell for.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's the really smart way to look at it. You know, so you know, I want to be cognizant of your time. Before I'm going to ask like 1 or 2 more questions, but you know, before you go, what's your favorite NFT?
I don't know if it's an NFT, if this counts, but it's a smart contract. I met somebody at NFT NYC that has a smart contract called Knockoff, and you can mint your own token and it copies all the metadata from the original NFT and it creates a copy paste NFT, but on the Knockoff smart contract. So it's like very obviously different, but it's like just kind of tongue in cheek, like, you know, Santiali, like copy paste. And that always just like has been really interesting to me. I would love to develop a project that creates this sort of like blockchain kaleidoscope effect of creating like knockoffs of knockoffs of knockoffs of knockoffs of an original that's on the Superrare contract or something like that.
That's
That
really
would, yeah,
that's really cool. I like that concept a lot.
yeah, I think it's a really like clever and sort of controversial smart contract. I wish I knew the artist that wrote the contract off the top of my head, but I can't remember. I have their business card somewhere, but I'm sure you could find them around. Like I know they have stickers everywhere, and they were all
Right.
over all these events. So yeah,
All
but
right,
that's
cool.
a
I'll
really great.
keep an eye out for them.
Yeah.
And then finally, where you have, when does at username drop?
That project, I'm just wrapping it up, so I'm hoping to release it within the first half of March, but I don't have a set date yet. I will be pumping out a lot of previews and sneak peeks and like promo for that project coming up in the next week or so. So just if you follow me on my social medias, it'll be all over the place. So
And
hopefully then.
what's your social medias for those that don't know?
I'm at SamJ Studios on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, cool. And that's the best place for people to stay up to date on you and your project.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. But yeah, Sam, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Really excited for all the stuff that you're working on. Thank you for being a great voice for the queer community, and being like, I think it takes a lot of guts to go out there, be docs, and I love the thought process that you have with regards to being that person to say, hey, like, we are diverse, and being a leader in the space for that. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems so violent when you say that I'm doxxed. I don't even
Oh.
think about it like that, but
No, well,
it's really funny.
but putting your personality out there and who you
Yeah.
are as an individual, I just think that like it's a very deliberate thing that you did, and I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you're giving people like myself the opportunity to help showcase.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show. And thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you guys next week on The Cutting Edge.